Are doing well. My name is Geneva Scott. I'm director of the Career Center here at CodePath. For those of you who haven't seen me in another event, we're really excited to welcome you today to an event with Microsoft, who will be participating in our virtual career fair coming up. But today we're talking about belonging at Microsoft. So there'll be an opportunity to hear from some folks working at Microsoft about their experiences. You'll also get a chance to hear from the recruiting team and have a chance to ask questions as well. We encourage you, feel free, love everybody introducing themselves in the chat. Feel free to do that. Let us know where you're calling in from. We're so excited to have you all here. Just a few housekeeping notes. There hopefully will be an opportunity at the end if we get through everything for live Q&A, but if not, feel free to drop your questions for Microsoft in the chat. We have Jordan who will be answering as many as he can get to. And there are a ton of you here, which we love to see. So just know that, we may not get to all questions, but you will get a chance to follow up with the Microsoft team, and also will receive a copy of this recording at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the Microsoft team to introduce themselves and the presentation.
Thanks, Geneva. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Microsoft presentation. My name is Christina. I'm a university recruiter at Microsoft. We're so excited for you guys to be here today and hope this presentation gives you a sense of what it's like to work at Microsoft. So for our presentation agenda today, we'll introduce you to your aligned university recruiters. We'll discuss belonging through my journey to Microsoft. Then we'll have a roundtable discussion with some Microsoft employees. We'll talk about applying for roles at Microsoft, and then, as Geneva said, follow up with a live Q&A session. Next slide, please. Chi, if you want to kick it off.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So exciting to see over 200 of you here. I'm really, really excited to be speaking with you. And yes, as we said, we love seeing everyone's intros in the chat. As a university recruiter, I love seeing them. So I'll try and connect with as many as I can on LinkedIn, but can't make any promises. But yes, my name is Chioma Achalonu. I go by Chi. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am an engineering university recruiter at Microsoft. The universities that I support are located in the Southeast region. If everyone could try and stay on mute during this, just so that we can. I'm not sure if I'm able to mute participants, but if you can go on mute, that would be.
Yeah, I'm going to mute him. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so the universities that I support are in the Southeast of the United States. So it's a really big region, but I also support recruiting from Microsoft-sponsored organizations and conferences, and CodePath is one of those organizations. So I'm super excited to hopefully recruit some of you this year, this recruiting season.
And like I said, my name is Christina Ortiz. I am an engineering recruiter at Microsoft. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I sit in Columbus, Ohio, and I support students attending universities in the Midwest region, as well as diversity conferences and organizations, including CodePath. All right, now we will go into my journey at Microsoft. So we're really going to pivot today so you guys can get a sense of what it's like to work at Microsoft, how our Microsoft employees came to Microsoft, and how they feel connected with the company. So Siddhan, if you want to take it away with introducing yourself. And you might need to come off mute.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I was talking to myself for a second. Hey, everyone. I'm Siddhant Agarwal. I'm a software engineer presently at Microsoft Atlanta. I'm actually in Microsoft's Atlanta office currently, and it's a little painstaking to, join a Zoom call when you're so used to Teams. So I moved from India a few years ago, and yeah, I have been in the US for the past 5 years.
Wesley, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi everybody. My name is Wesley. I'm currently in Los Angeles. I'm an associate consultant with the Azure Cloud and AI team, and yeah, I'll give more of an introduction on my journey slides, but that's a brief intro for now.
Scott, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hey friends, my name is Scott Hanselman. I'm here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm in my home office. I've worked remotely for Microsoft for 14 years, and I've been in tech for 30 years in April of this year, so 30 years and 4 months. And I'm excited to chat with you all about how I got here and how I've been in tech so long.
Great. And Keely, if you want to wrap us up, or Kylie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, all good. Hi, everyone. My name is Kylie Surma. Pronouns are she, her. I am based out of Brooklyn, New York. I am a senior customer success account manager servicing Big Four customers in the Northeast.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So now we'll get into the My Journey at Microsoft section. Siddhant, if you want to let us know how you came to Microsoft.
It's been an interesting journey for me so far. I was born and brought up in countryside of India, just like in the foothills of Himalayas. You go to my house's rooftop, you can very well see the Himalayas. And then I went to military school just because I wanted to explore quite a bit. And my parents were good enough to let an 11-year-old decide for themselves. So I ended up being at military school. And then I decided that, oh, I like the military aspects of it, but I want to pivot towards the more peaceful side. So I wanted to try diplomacy. So I prepared for Indian Foreign Services for quite a bit in India. And it's a little more competitive than you would think. There are like 32 vacancies, and there are like 1 million applicants in that. So I did not make the cut, fair to assume. After that, I started my degree in computer science. It means during the time I started my degree in computer science, and in India itself. And then I realized that I wanted to, dig deeper into it. And so I moved to US in 2017. I went for master's in computer science. I was lucky enough that I was able to get a research assistantship with BMW at the time. So with a research assistantship, I'm not sure if you all are aware, you get like fee waivers and stuff. So it came in very handy for me to, not pick up any debt and kind of go through on masters and explore the US culture in the meantime. This was back in 2017. And so I did that for 2 years. And then one of the reasons I chose Clemson University was they had a very good shooting program. And having that background of military school, I was very much into shooting. So I shot very competitively in 10-meter air rifle, went to nationals, represented Clemson. It was a lot of fun, for sure. And then as a full-time engineer, I took my first job with a startup in South Carolina, and it was a lot of fun. We dealt with like how to create pricing engines for automotive loans, and I did that for a couple of years. Did a lot of product development with my previous company, and then I joined Microsoft last year in August. I actually finished up my first year with Microsoft just last week. So it has been a very exciting journey so far. And currently I'm working as a software engineer on identity team. So identity team, if folks don't know, it's part of like, think about getting access. So if you want to get access, you want to get logged in, how is that backend being managed? That's a lot of it is being managed by identity team, and making sure you are who you say you are, and making sure, as a employee of some company who uses Azure, you have the right accesses to all of those items. Fun fact, when I was in my undergrad back in India, I applied for Microsoft at the time, and I did not get selected. I can fairly say at this point, because I reached the final round, but then after final round, I never heard back. So I'm still waiting on that result, I guess. But it's fair to assume that I did not make the cut at the time. So, but I was fairly obsessed with Microsoft. I have applied to a lot of positions. It's never, it's not always the easiest uh, task to get such position, but you had to, work around, do some research, kind of lay yourself up to it in making sure that you find the right fit within Microsoft and Microsoft finds the right fit within you. And aside from the tech space in Microsoft, I am also a member of Asians Employee Resource Group in Microsoft, and FLI groups here at Microsoft.
Thanks for sharing, Siddhant. And I agree, Microsoft is really competitive to get into. So I'm happy that you were finally able to find your place here. Next, we'll go to Wesley for Wesley's journey to Microsoft.
Yeah, hi again, everybody. I'm glad to speak and share with you my journey. I have a pretty unique journey coming to Microsoft, and I'll be happy to talk about that. So as I mentioned, I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, still in Los Angeles today. And for me, I was a first generation American and also first generation to attend college. So for me, it was kind of finding my own path in school, and I felt an opportunity gap when I was looking for jobs. So I wasn't really sure what exactly that it was that I wanted to do with anything. I was a competitive swimmer all my life. So I got a scholarship to attend Harvard Westlake School, and also swam competitively in college at Pomona College. And for me, I studied economics and finance at Pomona. So I never really touched anything like technical, never coded anything before I got to Microsoft, didn't really know what it was that I was interested in. So without like having that kind of guidance, I would say I pursued a bunch of different industries. For example, I went to Germany to work for a biotech company as a business development analyst. I worked with a venture capital firm in San Francisco, and I also was a banker with Wells Fargo for another summer. And although these sound pretty random, like just different industries, I realized what I liked and didn't like with every role that I had. And like some key takeaways was that I loved working with customers. I loved being on top of new technologies. I liked finding the needs and pain points of different customers and using like my skills to address some of these problems, giving value that wasn't there before. And so I realized that I might want to go into consulting and also work for an industry that's on top of these different trends. So that's how I became interested and obsessed with joining Microsoft, giving someone without the most technical background an opportunity to try out these different programs as part of the Aspire program. And so when I came back to school at Pomona, I decided to hone my interest and learn some basic coding, and also continue to help other students interested in breaking into like different fields from what they were studying. And so I joined Microsoft right after graduation, and I'm coming up on a year next week. So I think I joined Microsoft maybe like 2 weeks after Siddhant. And now I'm in a role with the Azure Cloud and AI space as a technical consultant. And I also continue to do other activities at Microsoft, like participating in hackathons, and also, like Siddhant, also a member of Asians at Microsoft and an active member in the Aspire community. So that's my background, how I got to Microsoft.
Thanks for sharing, Wesley. We will send it to Scott now for Scott's journey to Microsoft.
Hey, mine's a little different just because I'm old, but I'm the first person in my family to go to college. My dad was a firefighter and my mom was a zookeeper. And my fifth grade teacher got an Apple II computer for the group. And I happened to be the one who was just kind of somehow took to it and was really good at it. And this is really kind of a story about how accessibility and being able to have an opportunity is just so important. If you don't have a computer, if you don't have access to computers, there's some parallel universe where I'm doing totally different stuff. And one day I came home and our van was gone, and they had bought a computer at the recommendation of my teacher. So somebody advocated for me and created luck. I'm a big believer in luck, and I recognize that the equation for luck is being prepared and opportunity. And there's so many people who are very, very prepared and never get the opportunity. And it's our job to lend our privilege and to create luck for people and make opportunities. And those opportunities are things like this Zoom call. They're the warm introductions. They're the LinkedIns that you're putting into the chat. So when my non-technical blue-collar parents took a chance and sold that van and bought that computer, that then sent me to Portland Community College for a 2-year degree. And then I spent 11 years working on my 4-year degree. And I didn't actually graduate from college until 2003, when I was already 11 years into my job. I did a bunch of side hustles. I created a lot of software. I worked on Palm Pilots and Apple Newtons. I worked at Nike and Intel. I did a lot of outreach, blogging, podcasting, YouTubing, and TikTok, all trying to let people know that I knew what I was doing, even though my degrees were from colleges that didn't have a name. And that got me to Microsoft about 14 years ago. And I'm very blessed and very lucky to be here, because that luck was created by people offering me opportunities. And even though I've been in tech now, as I said, for 30 years, I still remember being hungry. I still remember 9 kids in a 2-bedroom house. And I still talk to my zookeeper mom and my firefighter dad every day and tell them that I thank them for letting me do this. And just recently, if you take a look at my TikTok, I went and finally last week purchased a Commodore 64 in the original box that still has the tape from Sears where my parents bought that computer, and I'm rebuilding it and putting it together to show my kids. And then in the vein of trying to lend my privilege to others and lift up the next generation, I'm also a board member at Microsoft of developer division BAM, Black at Microsoft, and also the Disability Enterprise Resource Group. Even though I look like an old straight white guy, healthy, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have an open source artificial pancreas and a number of medical implants and a number of invisible disabilities. So I think it's really important to understand the pie chart of one's identity and the kind of the heuristics of who we are, and make sure that people are given opportunities and accessible opportunities as much as they can. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all and to our new friends during the panel. But that's my story, and you can go and Google me, and with Bing, and I love to chat with all of you.
Yeah, Scott, I was going to ask if you wanted to share your TikTok, if you post
Well, so my last
anything
name
of relevance
is Hansel.
there.
My last name is Hanselman. So S as in Scott, Hanselman is my name everywhere. So you'll find me on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. But if you just go to hanselman.com, you'll be able to find me, and all of my links are up there. And that's someone actually in the chat commented that that's my YouTube 100,000 subscriber plaque on the wall there. That was
Wow.
sweet that you all found that. And thank you, Nikhil, for putting my links in the chat there.
You already have some fans. Thanks for sharing, Scott. And then we'll wrap it up with Kylie to share her journey at Microsoft.
Scott, I don't know how I'm going to follow this, but I'm going to try. I'm a little bit older and maybe not as aged as you, Scott, or we'll say experienced as you, Scott, but I have been in the field for about 15 years now. So my story is a little bit like Scott's, but not exactly. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and quite frankly, I was just from a poor family. I was raised in public housing and on welfare by a single mother. But I think that teachers started to really take to me early on. I found that I got the attention and gratification from being good at school that helped continue me to pursue anything that was education related. So once it came time for me to go to high school, my mother said, hey, let's try to get you into this private high school, which at the time cost more than the university that I ended up going to. And I didn't think there was any chance that I was going to get in, let alone have someone come up with the financial resources for me to go there. Luckily for me, my test scores, I think my preparedness, Scott, and the opportunity arose where there was a private donor who took a chance on me, and they covered my 4 years at this private high school. And I really think a lot or thank that high school a lot for changing the course of my life. I think there's a lot of things that have come from it. From there, I earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. So I was also the first to go to school in my family. I'm also the first to get a passport and leave the United States, which is pretty interesting, all things considered. And then I was the first to actually go to business school as well. So I was able to, again, do quite well throughout university and get good test scores that I was able to get a nice scholarship to go to Florida International University in Miami, Florida. After winters in Minnesota, it was time for me to move on. What I found after grad school was that even though it was really easy for me to get good grades and to get, the attention and the good marks at school, it was also challenging to find a job. And I think, like you, Scott, said, maybe a little bit the opportunities, or sorry, maybe it was you, Wesley, opportunities weren't always there. And I think what I realize now that I didn't in the past was that I didn't have enough of a professional network. I was so focused at school, or I was so focused at working my full-time job to pay for my living expenses, that I didn't necessarily create the network or the community that I now know is super important to building one's career. So as for my career, I am not a technologist, I am not an engineer, but I am a woman in tech. I have spent the last 14 years within the greater Microsoft partner ecosystem. I actually first started at a small marketing agency where Microsoft was my client. So I really just fell into the world of Microsoft in 2008. After that, I moved on to Slalom Consulting, which is another Microsoft partner based out of Chicago, Illinois. And there I helped them lead their entire marketing organization. They had not done any marketing in the 5 years they were open at that time. So I created a marketing function. And after that, I moved on to Avanade, which is Microsoft's largest partner. It's a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft. So they are consultants that only consult on Microsoft technology. At Avanade, I did a variety of things. I am obsessed with learning and trying new things. So I spent several years in a variety of global HR roles, which included time in Chicago as well as New York City, in addition to a short-term assignment in Sydney, Australia. And after my time in HR, I decided that I wanted to work with our customers. I wanted to have a greater impact on people outside of the organization. So I became client-facing, where I worked in a pre-sales role, actually strategically advising our customers on how to best implement their Microsoft technology to impact their employee experience. During all this time, 7 years is a long time for work with one organization. I unexpectedly lost my mother in 2019. I then met my partner, who's in the photo here, Maxime, and we then married and gave birth to our little baby boy, Jules, who's in the photo there. He just turned 1 year old last week. And while I was on maternity leave, I had a friend who had worked with me at Avanade give me a call and just say, hey, you've got to come to Microsoft now. And I think that having this big life event happen last year with becoming a mother really helped me refocus what I wanted to do with my career, made me question what type of organization I wanted to work for and the values that were there. And Microsoft just became a calling for me. And so I started the interview process and I landed here in May. As mentioned, I'm a customer success account manager. So what I do is I take care of our customers after the sale to make sure that we are meeting all their needs and our contract obligations. So it's really about taking care of people and personal relationships. I have loved that everyone is super helpful here. I have felt really, really welcomed into the community. I am part of our women's ERG, also part of the first generation low income group, as the rest of my peers are here, a part of the parents group, and I'm also part of the race allyship ring in the Northeast. I also have some other fun facts on screen if you want to ask me about those later. Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks for sharing, Kylie, and thanks for all of our panelists for giving a quick introduction about themselves. Now Chi will take it away with our roundtable discussion to give everyone a little bit of insight on what it's like to actually work at Microsoft and what opportunities that we have available for our employees.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. And thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your amazing journeys to Microsoft. I learned so much about each of you, and I'm excited to ask you some more questions to learn even more. And I'm sure everyone on the call really appreciated hearing everyone's stories. I think it's super important to hear all the different ways that you can show up at Microsoft. So yeah, let's get started with our panel roundtable. And yes, this is a slide just showing our speakers once again. I did put a note in the chat that if you want to see just the speaker as opposed to seeing a grid of everyone's videos, feel free to adjust your view if you click view in the top right and then click side by side speaker. That might be helpful for this. But yeah, so let's get started with our first question. So the question is going to go to Scott and Kylie. We'll start with you, Scott. Why do you feel Microsoft is a great place to work for you personally?
I think I have gained some experience working, in companies like BMW and a startup that I did in the past. And one thing that I really, really love about Microsoft is the peers, the connections that you get at Microsoft. Because the connections that you get at Microsoft are, and in a daily basis, you get to work with some very amazing people. They can make you feel dumb at times. You're like, oh man, how am I ever going to get this done? People around me are so smart and everything. There can be those days. I've had plenty of those days. But in the end, I'm just very thankful that I'm contributing to such a big goal. And I know exactly where my contribution goes in that bigger picture. And that is one of the most beautiful things about it, where, uh, feeling that you are always learning something new. And that is one of the most satisfying feelings I get at Microsoft.
Awesome. Thank you, Sid. And Scott, I'd love to hear why you feel Microsoft is a great place for you to work as well.
So without disrespecting any of our lovely competitor companies, the Googles and the Facebooks and all the other companies, one of the things that I like about Microsoft is that we don't have just one thing that we sell. Right? We know about the Netflixes and the Airbnbs, and then we know what they sell. They sell that one thing. I feel like if I got tired of working on developer tools, I could go work on Xbox. And if I got tired of working on Xbox, I could go work on AI, and I could work on Bing, and I could work on games, and I could work on Surface hardware, and I could work on keyboard controllers. Like Microsoft is, from a product perspective, one of the most diverse companies in its portfolio of stuff. Well, if I feel like I was working for somewhere else, I would work on selling that thing that company makes, and then I would get tired of that. So the reason that I've stuck around here so long, and the reason that I like Microsoft so much, is that there's so many different things to work on. And that's why I'm here. And currently right now I work on developer tools, which is cool because if you think about how interesting it is to be a programmer right now, to be a developer, there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's about 65 million coders. So 65 million coders are creating the stuff for the other 8 billion. And that sense of power of creation and the empowerment of making something and sharing it with the entire planet is why I keep sticking around at Microsoft.
I love that. Thank you, Scott. And then Kylie, yeah, I'd love to hear from you too. Like, why do you feel Microsoft is a great place for you to work, aside from all of the benefits that Sid and Scott already mentioned?
Yeah, I won't double up on too much of what they said, but I feel like the opportunities are endless here. One thing that I have found truly helpful, okay, two things I found truly helpful since starting just a few months ago was the ability to connect with people. I have reached out to people on different teams in different countries, on different time zones, and no one has said no. to a 15-minute conversation. The organization is so big and the opportunities are endless, but everyone is really open to sharing and talking about their role, what they do on their team, and how they fit into the organization. I think understanding that, similar to Scott saying, he could go somewhere else, the people here really want to help you figure out what's best for you. As also mentioned, it's hard to get into Microsoft. Not gonna lie, right? The interview process is tough. They're looking for really, really high quality top talent and people who want to push themselves. And one of the things that I've been able to take advantage of is we have learning days for Microsoft US, depending on what subsidiary you're in. And I've been able to already receive my first Microsoft certification. Now, I haven't studied in 10 years, right? And to have that dedicated time to study for a technical certificate was really important to me. I think at other employers, not to shame anyone, I would have had to take that from my personal time. And now that I'm a new mom, my time is even more sacred outside of work. So having that opportunity to actually find dedicated time during my workday to improve myself has been really, really important and makes me feel like it was the right choice to come here.
That's amazing. Thank you, Kylie. And yeah, as we say, like in recruiting, we love to hire and recruit learners versus knowers. So learning is very, very much encouraged at Microsoft. And of course, it's very supported, clearly. So thank you for sharing that. The next question will go to Wesley. Wesley, what would you say are some of the non-advertised benefits of working for Microsoft?
Yeah, and I guess a lot of what Scott and Kylie also mentioned, there's, I would say, three main things that Microsoft offers that are non-advertised but are huge benefits for me. The first is the encouragement of learning. There's so many times my manager has sent me off to like take a 3-day workload of classes and like put aside like the current projects I'm on to just encourage my learning. And these are like expensive classes that I'm attending that my manager is willing to pay for because she thinks learning is really important for my development. And two is like the feeling of community. So in a role like consulting, oftentimes there's a lot of competitiveness trying to get on a project with your colleagues, your coworkers. But at Microsoft, I have never had this kind of feeling. Everyone's willing to work together with you. They're sharing resources, sharing different engagement opportunities. So just the community that Microsoft has built, it kind of feels like a college campus. It's so big. There's so many people to meet. They're all willing to help each other out. And finally, the work is really cool. I think you probably know Microsoft has a lot of different technologies that they sell, but the projects that we work on with customers is really meaningful. Getting to work with nonprofits, even if that isn't the most profitable for Microsoft, just having these kinds of opportunities like interface is really cool. That's not always advertised to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Wesley. And I wanted to ask all of the panelists a question. And the question is, how do you stay involved in Microsoft outside of your core group? Are you involved in any ERGs? I know that many of you touched on this, but I'd love to hear all of you expand a little bit on your involvement outside of your core business group and your ERGs that you're involved with. So I'll pass that question first to Sid.
Hey, so I think one of the biggest ways where I have been able to contribute is the Asians chapter for Microsoft in Atlanta. Atlanta is fairly a very new office for Microsoft. And I think the new office has opened a little over 3 months ago now. So it's been hard, with COVID, with a new office still coming in place to organize events, but still providing that sense of belongingness to all the employees, making sure that the diversity and inclusivity is respected within the company. I have been very actively involved in the Asians chapter in organizing events, ranging from organizing Diwali festival, in Atlanta for Microsoft employees, and during Asian American Pacific Islander Month, we did another series of events like breaking the bamboo ceiling and inviting other successful Asians in Atlanta to to share their stories, to see how there is diversity, and in that diversity there's unity.
I love that. And I love to hear on how involved you are in that employee resource group, which, yes, thank you, Christina, for clarifying. ERG stands for Employee Resource Group. And Microsoft has many of them and many communities outside of the official employee resource groups too. So I will pass the question off to Scott.
We had a barbecue. We had the BAM Black at Microsoft barbecue, and I got to get invited to the cookout, which is always nice. And that was really cool, just to have like so many people that had a shared identity in one place and feeling excited to be represented and presented at Microsoft. But I also want to turn the question upside down a little bit and answer it in an unusual way, because the question was, how do we stay connected to Microsoft when we're not at Microsoft? I like to also be explicitly disconnected from Microsoft. So things that I do to not think about Microsoft are not installing Teams on my phone. I have a really cool boss who texts me in off hours to test if I'm paying attention to work or not. I was on vacation recently and my boss texted me and I replied and he said, "I'm shutting off your badge." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because it only took you 30 seconds to reply to me and you're on vacation. Stop talking to me." And I was like, that was cool. Like, I have a boss who like aggressively makes us vacate. And it's as important to stay connected to Microsoft as it is to stay deeply disconnected from Microsoft. So like when you're on break, you break. And I think that's important.
I love that. And yeah, that should be how everyone is. So everyone be like Scott. Awesome. Thank you. And I'll pass it off to Kylie.
Yeah, in terms of my ability to get involved, one thing that I personally do in addition to any of the ERGs I'm in, I connect with the ERGs, whether it's via Yammer or any of the smaller groups that aren't yet official ERGs via their Teams group. Just being involved in the conversation is important for me. But what I have found to be even more valuable is I force myself to go into the office. And I'm going to use the word force because I have been working remotely for 7 years. And I think the pandemic really did me in, right? I miss working with people. And so I go into the New York City office, which is just outside of Times Square. I live in Brooklyn. For those who aren't familiar, it only takes me 30 minutes, but that's a commute, right? And that's time from my day that I'm willing to give because I want to be a part of the community. But then, like you, Scott, if it's time for a vacation, nothing is on my phone. I delete Outlook, I delete Teams, and I completely shut off. So I think there's a balance of finding how you can integrate with either the people in person or virtually that works best for you, right? There are people on my team that I don't think I will ever meet in person. They're never going to come in because they don't have to. And that's okay. And that's their choice. But we can connect in other ways by simply turning on our camera, sharing a little bit about our personal selves, in the beginning of calls or when we get connected, because that's where we can really drive value. And that's how we can provide input and impact to others who are different than us.
Thank you so much, Kylie. And lastly, Wesley.
Yeah, so my job is like a full-time remote position. I've only met my coworkers a few times when we've decided to meet up in a local office together, but I'm part of a few other groups that have created this kind of community. For example, I'm part of the Asian Microsoft Employee Resource Group, where we recently were meeting up at a local beach in Los Angeles to join like the Heal the Bay organization to clean up the beaches and just hang out with each other. And also I'm part of the Aspire community, where it's mostly new hires right out of undergraduate or graduate schools, where we can create events and host different kinds like virtual parties or things like that to just meet a variety of different people, even people outside of our organizations.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you, Wesley. And then I'm going to go back to Kylie actually for this next question, which is, do you feel that you can be yourself at Microsoft? And what does that mean to you?
I do feel like I could be myself at Microsoft, but I will be the first to admit that throughout the interview process, I felt very, very strong imposter syndrome. I kept asking, why would Microsoft want to hire me? I'm not technical. Even though I've been in the ecosystem, I am not a technologist. I do not know how to code. I never will, I don't think, learn how to code. But what I found is that the second I started on the team, I could be myself. I was actually very much welcomed for bringing a new perspective to the conversation. And my people skills, my soft skills are what matter most in my role. And it wasn't necessarily the technical skills that they were looking for from me. Second to that, well, maybe not second to that, but another point is that as a new mom, I have my calendar blocked every single morning from 8 a.m. to 8:30. Now, that might be very well considered working hours for most of my team as well as my customer, but that's the time that I need in order to get my son to daycare. And I also value that 30 minutes of time with him. As a working woman, like I need to send my child to daycare to someone else's hands for 10 hours a day, but I give that 30 minutes to myself. And I feel like that has never been questioned by anyone on my team nor my customer. Now, if my customer came to me and asked for a certain day at an 8 a.m. call, I would make things work with my husband. But I have found that, being a new mom, I've been able to find that flexibility, work later hours if I need to, while still being able to find that balance for myself at home.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I feel like everyone at Microsoft understands no matter what situation you're in, whether you're a mom, whether you have anything else going on in your life, work will always be here when you come back. So do what you got to do. And I love that.
That includes cats and dogs as well.
Yes.
Parents, siblings, we all have lives outside of work. So
yeah. If you're having a rough day, if you're, experiencing anxiety, like you can do what you need to do, and Microsoft will always be here.
Can I add
Scott,
something real briefly? Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Just adding on to that, there were two things that happened that were cool during the pandemic. One, they gave us like actual mental health days. So like we call them like I can't even days. So like if it's like a random Friday, it's like I can't even. It's like, okay, I'm going to just go for a walk today. That's a cool thing that happened. And then another thing that was really cool was that we're seeing leadership and VPs model behavior. And by that, I mean, they're like actual freaking humans. So like I was in a meeting with our VP and we were doing this big presentation, and this called it's a, what's the word? EAR, what's the word? Engineering area review, big deal. And then her daughter comes in, she's like 5 years old, and we're thinking it's going to be one of those BBC moments where like she shoves the kid in the face and knocks them over, right? She put her daughter on her lap and she sat there, and the daughter watched the whole engineering review, and it was like, wow, okay, like it's not awful, it's not a crisis, it's not a scandal that a 5-year-old human being came in and hung out with us. And by the VP doing that, it showed us that it was like okay to be human and have lives. And that was really cool. Sorry to add on to that.
No, don't apologize. I love that addition. And while I have you, actually, the next question is for you. And it's switching gears a little bit, but it also has to do, I guess, with feeling like you belong not only at Microsoft, but also when you're interviewing at Microsoft. So as a hiring manager and an interviewer, what do you typically look for in a candidate that might indicate that Microsoft and the candidate are a good match?
I hope this analogy works. I'm interested in the chat to see if people get this. But when you're putting together a basketball team, you hire for height. I don't care about your ball handling skills. I can teach you that. I'm interested in, can you deal with other humans? Are you pleasant? Can you work in a team? But are you tall, right? If you're 7 feet tall, I want you on my basketball team. Well, I'm not coordinated. It's okay. We'll work it out. So when I interview someone, I want tall people. And by that, I mean someone who, I'm not interested in whether you do a for loop in C# or whether you can do leet code, as much as you have a sense of systems thinking and you understand how computer systems fit together. Programming languages come and go. I mentioned that I've been in tech for a long time and I've got these degrees. All the languages I learned in college are dead. Every operating system I learned in school is dead. Everything you learned in school, every program, every computer that you worked on will not exist in 20 years. And that's okay because you learned how to learn. So I want to interview people who know how to learn, who have good energy, have good vibes, and can solve a problem, not by me giving them tests of trivia, but by me saying, let's think about how the system fits together and how you can fit into that system. Hope that analogy worked. I don't want to disrespect our petite friends because it's not about actual height.
No, I think that was perfect. And I've never heard that analogy before, but I think I'm going to start using it. So thank you, Scott, for sharing that. And on the topic of interviewing and recruiting. We'll share a little bit more after the panel discussion on Microsoft University recruiting too. But Wesley, I have a question for you. And the question is, what's the difference about working for Microsoft as compared to some of the other places that you worked?
Yeah, so I think a huge difference is that I've worked at big companies before in the past, but Microsoft, like other companies, is also very big with so many different departments. But it's really encouraged here that we actually interact with different organizations. For example, when I was working in banking, there was like a great wall, they would call it, where there's a lot of policies where you can't interact with the traders or the salespeople. But at Microsoft, we are encouraged to talk to people. So even though I'm in the tech space here as a consultant, I oftentimes reach out to different product teams. I'm reaching out to managers that I'm interested in their products, or reaching out to the finance organizations because that's still an interest of mine, and just chatting to see what kind of skills they look for when they hire. Because even though I'm happy in the role I'm in now, I'm always keeping my eyes open and understanding that there's people I can speak to that'll respond to me right away.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Wesley. And I'm glad you found that here at Microsoft. Okay, this is the last question for the panel, and it'll go to all of you. The question is, what is one thing you wish you knew before you started working for Microsoft? And I will have Sid answer that first.
Well, let's see. I think one of the biggest things I felt, that I could have known is it's okay to not know everything. I remember when I got my offer from Microsoft, I was so curious to know what team will I be working on, what will my work look like, so that I can already start picking on those things, because I want to make sure that, going in, it doesn't come across that I don't know the stuff that the team is trying to develop. And you cannot possibly know everything. And it's completely okay. It's completely acceptable to not know everything, because as Scott mentioned earlier, those things can be taught. And you just have to go by it. Those things can be taught, those things can be learned, and the company accepts that there's this learning curve, but you should always be willing to learn.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll go to Kylie next.
Facetiously, I will say that I wish I knew how happy I would be here and I would have applied years ago. No offense to the other organizations that I've been at. Like Wesley mentioned, coming from a consulting background, at the last two partners that I work with, consulting, it can be a different beast. There's just a lot of competition, and that's fine. And I was able to thrive in that. But what I have found here, and what I didn't really believe, is how team oriented everyone is here. Everyone works together truly. And that goes to, reaching out to someone for help, asking a question. There are no dumb questions. Asking a question about the 800th acronym you've heard that day. It's all okay to not know the answers. And I really think coming in with that perspective would have been something that would have even helped me ease into my role in the transition to a new career even more easily than Microsoft made it for me.
Thank you, Kylie. And then lastly, we will go to Scott. What's one thing you wish you knew before you started working at Microsoft?
I think for the first 7 or 8 years of being a programmer, I was kind of a dick. And I spent a lot of time trying to know all the answers, like Sid mentioned. And I think I needed to learn to shut up and listen and be comfortable not being the smartest person in the room. And in the remaining 22 years, since I figured that out, I have been much more successful and much happier. It's much less about you grinding leet code problems and trying to be the smartest. And it's much more about you being a pleasant, kind, joyful collaborator. and moving the ball forward as a team. I'm sad it took me 7 or 8 years to figure that out. And I would encourage you, as you start your careers coming out of university, if you just take a breath, be present, and listen to people, including your interviewers. Even a breath in an interview and a pause and a thought tells me that you heard me, as opposed to you were just waiting for your turn to speak. That's something that I learned and I needed to learn earlier in my career.
That's really good advice. So everyone write that down. And I apologize. I said lastly, but I do want to ask the same question to Wesley. What's one thing that you wish you knew before you started working for Microsoft?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is that you'll learn everything you need on the job. Like I mentioned, I didn't know how to code before coming into this technical consulting role. I didn't know anything about Azure, but I kind of forced myself in undergrad to take classes I thought would be helpful to get me to that next level at Microsoft, where I took classes I knew that I could get good grades and to maximize my GPA. But just like a few months into like my first job, I realized no one really cares about your GPA or like the knowledge you had before coming to work. So really important to just enjoy your time in undergrad, take things that you're interested in, because at the end of the day, you'll learn everything you need on the job and no one's gonna judge you for not knowing something if you're a new employee.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wesley. And thank you, Kylie, Scott, and Sid for all of your answers to our panel questions today. I think that was a really good discussion and I hope everyone saw that as insightful. But we're not quite done. I know we have a few minutes left and we definitely want to address university recruiting opportunities and how you can potentially get your foot in the door at Microsoft, just like all of our panelists have today. So I will pass it over to Christina to share a little bit more about our roles, our opportunities, and how to apply.
Thank you, Chi. So like Chi said, now you've kind of learned a little bit about positions at Microsoft. So now you're probably looking to see how you can fit in or how you can apply. So first, we will go over kind of what a recruiter looks for in a resume or a LinkedIn profile. First, we're looking for your contact info. So preferred name, email, best contact phone number, and then any links that you may have to like a LinkedIn, a GitHub, or type of portfolio. Next up, we'll look for your school info. So I have major and GPA listed at the top. We're pretty much open to any major. We just want to make sure that you list that on your resume. And as far as GPA, like you can feel free to list it if you want. You don't have to list it, but it just is a good thing to potentially have on your resume. Then we're also looking for your graduation date, including the month and the year. And we look at this so we can figure out what role you are eligible for. So whether you're eligible for a summer internship or a full-time role, we'll be able to figure that out based on what your graduation date is. Next, if you want to list any relevant coursework that you've taken, such as data structures and algorithms, or anything else that you think would be applicable to the job that you're applying for. Finally, any class, projects, individual or group, or any projects that you may have done on the side that show interest into the role that you're applying for. The next section and probably the bulk of the section of your resume will be the experience section. Here, we want you to list any internships, research, work experience, any of those like personal projects that you have, if you've participated in any hackathons or competitions, or if you've received any awards or certifications. And then finally, to wrap it all up, the section that we call skills and more is really to have us learn a little bit more about you outside of the classroom. So if you have leadership experience, whether you're a TA or a tutor, if you're involved in any organizations, including CodePath, any type of volunteering or personal interests, you can include that in your resume. Again, we look at resumes and LinkedIn profiles. So what I say is whatever you have in your resume, just paste everything into your LinkedIn profile because a recruiter might be looking for you on LinkedIn versus in their applicant tracking system. Next, we'll talk about our open roles. If you want to go to the next slide, Jordan. So like she said, our roles are open and they'll stay open on a rolling basis. Right now, we're hiring for summer internship and full-time opportunities. You can use the QR codes here if you want to scan with your phone and just be brought to the application right then. One thing to know is remember to include CodePath on your resume. And if you've done any projects with CodePath or anything like that, be sure to include that on your resume as well. Next, we will talk about the application and interview process. So again, you can scan those QR codes, or you can go on to microsoft.com/university. Here's where you'll submit your application. Following that, a recruiter will review your resume. And if you are selected for first round interviews, you'll get a notification from that recruiter. For our internship roles, we do a 30-minute phone screen. And then for full-time roles, we do an online assessment. If you pass that online assessment, you'll go to final round interviews. There you'll have between 2 to 4 virtual interviews. They're video interviews. And you'll meet with some people that could potentially be on your team if you were offered a role. If you do well in the final round interview, you could potentially receive a full-time offer. We try to get those offers out fairly quickly, within a week or two of your final round interview. And then we ask that you reply to the offer within 2 weeks if you're going to accept or decline. So that was a pretty quick rendition of how your resume should be and how you can apply to roles at Microsoft. If you have any questions, you can feel free to put those in the chat, and Chi and I will try to get to them when we can.
I think we have a couple of good questions so far. I answered one in the chat that Ethan asked about our applicant tracking system and if it filters through before recruiters see your application. No, all applications are viewed by recruiters so long as you meet the required qualifications that are listed on the application. So when you apply to a role and you answer those like required questions, as long as you answer those and meet the requirements, your application will be viewed by a recruiter. And then there was a question about how you should include CodePath on your resume. I think it's really great to include it like when you put your education at the top of your resume, which I recommend if you are a university or college student, I recommend putting your education at the top as that, is the most relevant at this period in your career. So I recommend putting any organizations that you're involved with kind of underneath that education section. And you can include if you're in a leadership role for a particular organization. I'm not sure if that's applicable for CodePath, but I think that's a really good place to put CodePath is right under the education portion on your resume. And then you can also include it on your LinkedIn under organizations, under your education, or even under the work experience portion on a LinkedIn profile.
I'm also I see that some people said that the QR code didn't work, so I'm going to put the links right in the chat for you guys to apply there. I think you might just have to copy and paste it into your browser.
Thank you, Christina. And then Olivia asked, is it possible that we can get recruiter and panelist contact information after this event? I will leave that up to the panelists. If you want to share your LinkedIn profile in the chat, feel free so that the CodePath members can add you on LinkedIn. As far as recruiter contact information, we will be refraining from sharing our emails just because of the very, very, very high volume, as you can imagine, inboxes. Like I think I've received 1 million LinkedIn messages and emails just in the span of this last hour. So we will be refraining from sharing that, but I promise you that as long as you apply, that is the best way to get your eyes in front of or a recruiter's eyes on your profile. And joining events like this, like of course we will be taking a look at the registration list to see who attended the event. So attending events like these, applying to our roles, that is truly the best way to get noticed and get your foot in the door at Microsoft. So even if you don't have a recruiter's contact information, I promise you that actually probably won't help you as much as attending an event or applying. And I know we're at time. I know there's so many good questions though. So we'll try to stay on and answer a couple of the questions in the chat, but I want to make sure that we are being conscious of the time of everyone who has joined today. So.
Like Chi said, thank you all for joining and feel free to drop. Chi and I will stay on a little bit longer just to answer any additional questions in the chat. And I believe that this session is recorded and you should receive the recording shortly.
Yep, exactly. So what I'll do, I'll tell the students, I will drop this in the VCF Career Center Slack channel, probably in the next 20 minutes. So you'll be able to access it there. So please let your friends know who were not able to attend that they can actually view this recording there. And I'll of course stay on with you all in case you have any questions.
Thank you, Anthony. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a great day, everyone who is dropping. Oh, was that a question? I'm sorry.
Can't really understand what you're saying. Do you mind dropping your question in the chat?
I think he said it was just an accidental unmute.
Oh,
Oh.
got it.
Or maybe someone else said that. I'm not sure.
Cool. I'm going to scroll up and see if I can answer like at least one more question while some people
Oh, it
are
looks
still
like
on.
Yep, Sam.
Sam, if you have your hand raised, if you want to come off mute.
Yeah, hey, thank you. So I was just wondering, I know you guys were speaking about you don't have to know every lead code problem or this and that, but how much do you think focusing on lead code is like super important versus like, you know, another part of getting prepared to be interviewed or for the interview, I should say?
That's a really good question. And I don't know, is Scott still on this call? I feel like you would probably have a really good answer for that. But my recruiting answer for that is I do think that lead code, practicing those problems is super helpful for just like the technical portion of the interview process when you are actually using our third-party coding environment called Codility. So I do think that's really important, but I also think more so, as many of our panelists mentioned, is preparing for those behavioral questions of like sharing examples of what it's like to work with you essentially. And while you are doing those problems, showing that you're a learner versus a know-it-all, and showing that you are really listening to your interviewer, asking for feedback as you go along, talking through your thought process, all of that. I think that's more important than like actually being like, oh yeah, I've done this problem before on lead code, if that helps. And I'll let any panelists answer if anyone is still on.
Yeah, I think a lot of the interview is about making sure that you're a fit for the team that you know, that you'll be working with, and then they can teach you those languages or processes after you join.
Good
Right.
question.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sam.
Link please send in the chat, please. The QR code is not working for
Okay,
me.
yep, I'll put the link in the chat again.
And another thing, Anthony, I'm not sure if this is a possibility when you communicate this recording and the deck to the CodePath students, but we can also send the links to all of our job opportunities and interview tips and resources. So that maybe, is it possible for you to include those?
Yeah, yes, that'll be perfect. So if you can get those over to me, I will literally post everything essentially as a package. So if you get that over to me, I'll post everything, you know, when I can.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll send that to you today, Anthony.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sherry, we do have roles that are open in Canada. If you go on Microsoft.com/university, you'll be able to see the roles based in Canada posted there.
And I saw a good question in the chat about editing your resume after applying, which is such a good question. And I'm so glad you asked that, because I highly recommend, if you have updates to your resume, which I feel like when you're in school and you're doing internships, you always have things to add to your resume. If you took a new class, add that to your resume. You can absolutely edit your resume. If you go into your Action Center on the Microsoft Global Career site, you can edit your resume and just upload a new one so that the recruiter can see your most recently updated one. Definitely do that when you apply or after you apply.
Deepa, would you like to come off mute?
Yeah, so my question was, while applying for full-time software roles, how effective are referrals, and what do you suggest? Like, should we reach out to people for referrals, or if you're applying through the CodePath, the diversity conference and organizations link, would we need a referral or would we not need a referral?
I would say if you have a person that you know that works at Microsoft that you're close with, having a referral, you know, will be a benefit to your application. We still review all applications, whether or not there's a referral, but I wouldn't try to solicit referrals from people you don't know.
Okay,
Good
got it.
question.
Thank you.
Manvel.
Yeah, hey. First of all, I just want to say thank you to whoever organized this event and the panelists. I think it was a great look inside Microsoft's work culture. My question was more about the work culture rather than recruiting. And it's how often do teams within Microsoft collaborate within each other? So as a new recruit, how often would you get to work with other teams versus, spending most of your time in your own team?
That's a really good question. And I can't speak from personal experience, but I can kind of speak to like what I've heard from others. I'm a part of BAM, as Scott mentioned, he's also a part of. And we had this summer intern experience team where I got the opportunity to work with other members of BAM to put on events for our BAM interns. And I worked with a software engineer. I forget what org she was in, but she talked about this huge project that she did with another team at Microsoft that wasn't her own, and how she had to kind of basically build this new, I don't know, she was talking all of these software engineering things that I didn't understand, but she basically worked with another Microsoft team in order to get that done. And so I think there is a lot of cross collaboration. And as Kylie mentioned, there's connection across multiple teams too, just if you initiate it as well. So if you are interested in talking to other people from other teams, everyone's always open to it. So while you might not be working on projects with other teams all the time, there is collaboration and just like connection across teams if you seek it out.
All right, perfect. Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And then, yeah,
sorry, Chief.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So actually, my question was that on Microsoft portal, I can see two openings. One is related with the CodePath, and one is the general full-time position for software engineering. So if I've applied for both the positions, so will I be reviewed differently for both the positions, or it's still like the same?
That's a really good question. It is the same exact role. So it is a software engineering role. So you will be reviewed and qualified the same. The qualifications for both roles are the same. It will just be a different recruiter reviewing your resume for just the general SWE opportunity versus Christina and I would be reviewing the one that has CodePath on it.
Okay. And one more question, like if I applied in this starting of August, so like when I can expect, like when can I expect another process, like in either an assessment, or when can I expect, is there a timeline for it?
Yeah, so I really recommend leveraging the Action Center on the career site. It gives you like real-time updates as soon as there's something that happened to your application. I would say give recruiters a few weeks to review your resume and make a decision on whether or not they'd like to move forward with an interview, or if your application was not accepted. I would say a few weeks is typically the timeline of when you'll get an answer. And then if you are selected for an interview, you'll see that update in your Action Center, but you'll also receive an email from Microsoft recruiters letting you know interview prep materials and just scheduling things.
Okay, and sorry, just final question. So just wanted to know one final thing, that like today, right now, the era of layoffs, like every company is doing layoffs or a hiring freeze. Just wanted to know that if is Microsoft also doing something like that for new grads, like whether it has reduced the hiring this time, or so is there some scenario like that, whether the Microsoft has reduced the hiring for new grads as compared to previous years?
That's a really good question. And I know that that's a big topic right now because there's just been a lot of uncertainty just with geopolitical events, supply chain obstacles, inflation, all of that. So I totally think that's a valid question. We are just reevaluating our hiring needs. That's not to say that we are freezing or pausing. We are just making sure that we're aligning all future hires with emerging needs of the business. So we still have a lot of open roles for university students and recent graduates. So don't fret. We are still hiring a ton of candidates and a ton of people to Microsoft this year, even despite the situation that's happening.
Okay,
guys,
thank you so much.
We'll be able to take maybe two more questions, and then we have to let our Microsoft friends go.
Yeah, I think Carol and Juan are going to be our final two. And then any additional questions, you can direct those to Anthony and Geneva, and they can connect with Chi and I.
Hello, thank you so much for the panel. I just have a question about the referral. So for example, if I have a person who I know at Microsoft and I would ask them for referral, should I do it before I apply to the position and then ask, or before?
I think it's a good idea to do it before, actually, because then once they refer you, you'll get an email to go submit your application, but it can go either way. If you've already applied, they can still refer you after you apply, but I recommend doing it, getting your referral before.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Juan, I think you're going to wrap us up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, my question was so I was looking at the links that you shared. Thank you for the panel, by the way. I don't see any, is there like any specific dates that you recommend, like applying? Like, I don't see any expiration date is what I'm trying to say. So do you recommend applying after like the CodePath career fair or before?
Yeah, so we keep our applications open on a rolling basis. So we just started accepting applications a few weeks ago, and it will be open until all of our roles are filled. We definitely recommend applying early. So if you have your resume updated now, we recommend applying now. And then after future like CodePath events or any other school projects, you can feel free to update your resume in your Candidate Action Center.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, again, if you guys have any additional questions, you can reach out to Anthony or Geneva from CodePath, and they will connect with Chi and I.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Again, you all have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.